Hey, hello, and welcome to our first ever podcast episode. We are Hear Me Out. My name is Ayşe.
I'm Fatih.
And I'm Deren. Hi, everyone.
So, before we get into our first topic, we want to kind of introduce ourselves a little bit, talk about what we do. So, I am currently in the third year of my law degree, and I'm living in London. And my areas of interest are climate justice, artificial intelligence and robotics regulation, and providing access to justice through pro bono work. I'm now giving the floor to my colleagues, to my friends to introduce themselves.
Thank you for that. My name is Fatih Segman. I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Nicosia. I currently live on the northern part of Cyprus, and my are medicine, looking at things through an intersectional point of view, environmental justice, socioeconomic privilege, and how those all combine to form our each individual identities as complex humans.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Deren. Deren Sanovar. Sure, that's the way you pronounce it. I live in Kyrenia, again, the north of Cyprus. I'm currently coming to the end of my gap year, and soon will be embarking on my university journey. I'll be studying global sustainability science, which is directly related to, I guess, my field of interest, sustainability, biodiversity, a little bit of stealing from what Fatih said, intersectionality, understanding world through the construction of systems and systems approaches, and just, all that good stuff. And yeah.
Okay, so today we are talking about a very common topic, especially among us students, called imposter syndrome. We want to start by talking a bit about what it is and what we understand from the definition. So to put it simply, imposter syndrome is a condition of feeling anxious and, despite being successful objectively, not experiencing that feeling internally. So the condition oftentimes results in people feeling like a fraud and doubting their abilities in the workplace or in general in life. It's sometimes referred to as perceived fraudulence. And some examples of feelings that come with it are, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, or I'm a fraud and people will find out sooner or later. So that's all I had to say on the definition.
Most of the times, people that experience imposter syndrome have a feeling that all of their successes and all of their worth was just boiled down to them being lucky, and they oftentimes don't give credit to themselves, and they feel like in a state of I don't belong, or I just got lucky. Next time is going to be the time where I don't get lucky. It's not continue like this, which is not the case, because as we said, objectively they're successful, they're hardworking, but they can't seem to take the credit for that.
I mean, I'm not as knowledgeable about this as much as you two are, because I never had to face it in this way. But I have a few questions about, I guess I'm trying to understand whether it is, imposed from within, is it external, is it like a mix of all things, and like what is really, I guess, the reason for the prevalence of this persistent self-doubt? Should we follow up with questions?
I can comment on this.
Yeah, okay.
I definitely think the environment that you're in plays a huge factor, but it's not only that. Your personal identity also comes into play. We have seen through studies that women, especially women of color, are more likely to experience imposter syndrome. And this connects to having a certain amount of privilege and how systems are set up, that they're actually designed to prefer people who are more privileged and put them in positions of success and put them in positions of, quote unquote, up the socioeconomic ladder, if we can phrase it like that. And when other individuals find themselves in those same positions because they've worked hard for it, they feel misplaced. So yes, there's an environmental factor to it, but it's because of your personal identity, which also interacts with the environmental factors as well.
Yes, and on the topic of personal identity and personal circumstances, demographics, I would like to pose a related question. So are there any cultural or gender differences in how imposter syndrome is experienced, and who is most likely then to experience it? And to start this point, I must say that I did come across a lot of articles that suggested that women tend to experience this syndrome more in comparison to men. So, and one of the main reasons for this is the gender wage gap, because there's this kind of common conception that is false but nevertheless exists, that women, despite doing the same amount of work, are not in a sense worthy of being paid the same amount as men. And in America, a woman employee earns just 83 cents for every dollar a man earns. So, and this statistic is from the US Department of Labor. And it's just, that's a significant difference on the grand scale of things. And it makes me think, how and why is it this way that more women feel imposter syndrome in comparison to men? Apart from the pay gap, and why can't we move past it? Let me just, go ahead.
I think when we start to talk about why some individuals are given the head start in life, we have to talk about the systems at play. So most everywhere we kind of have a patriarchal society, which gives men that privilege, that one step ahead in life, because because of how the society is set, because of how society views men, which is totally very destructive for other individuals. And then when other individuals find themselves in the same position, like whether gender non-conforming people or women find themselves in the same position as men, because the position was not created, in a sense, systematically for them, there is deep rooted feelings of, but I don't feel like this is for me, even though they worked hard for it, even though they even worked harder for it. There's still a feeling of I don't deserve this because of the system.
Now, this is really interesting. The way you've put it, actually, in a way, I found myself resonating with what you're saying about how these social standards, this misogynistic understanding of the world. You said it's destructive, right, for other individuals, but I think it is as destructive for the groups of men, right, with all the societal expectations put on men.
Absolutely.
And yeah, like when you said people, because there's not a standard, or like because there's not somebody to look up to in that position, people find it easier to be discouraged to keep going, even though they put as more, or maybe, yeah, as much or as more effort into what it is that they're trying to achieve. I think this is something I ran into not so long ago, regarding, I guess, wanting to pursue physics and like a study in astronomy, and this is something I was like discouraged about. I'm like, I don't really see that, meaning I don't really see non-white, non-men identifying people, I guess, being in positions like so. So I guess, I don't know, impostering.
Yeah, and that in a sense makes me think about minorities in general. Like, for example, being from the north of Cyprus, I oftentimes feel like a lack of international recognition about my identity, constant debates, kind of this struggle of people trying to come together and define what I am, who I am. And it does at times, especially, you know, this is more so kind of going into my personal experience now, but moving out of my country and going to a bigger city, you know, I feel very small because when I try to explain to people where I'm from and my identity, I get answers that assume that I'm not from there. For example, again, I'll give an example. I will identify myself as a Cypriot, and someone hears me speak in Turkish and they're like, oh, so you're Turkish. But no, that is my identity. So yeah, in that sense, I feel like when you're a minority, so for example, in a patriarchal, white-dominated society, women and non-cis male, non-white people are basically minorities. And it's the same case with like being from North Cyprus and being from like, you know, traditionally unidentifiable place, or just difficult for people to understand that like I am Cypriot and, you know, that's also. But yeah, what are you guys' experiences with imposter syndrome in general? And yeah, feel free to take the floor.
I mean, just to add on to that, like minuscule, not to get political, but I guess our Turkish Cypriot identity is a political playground, which does make like your experience as a whole so much more complex. I would like to, please do add, then I would like to drag the conversation somewhere else.
I can definitely elaborate on this point. Being Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot, Cypriot from the north, whatever identity you like, I don't mind, and studying on the south, it definitely felt like I'm just, for example, in my situation, I'm just driving 45 minutes away, but I still feel like I don't belong at my national identity, political identity. On top of that, going to medical school as well, which has really high pressure and high stress, made me feel a lot of like, am I supposed to be here? Do I really belong? Did I deserve to be sat in this seat that I am right now? Which I observed that other people didn't feel. And then it made me question, but like, why do I feel like this? And they don't. I had individuals in my class that were like very super comfortable with being there, almost too comfortable. they were individuals from a very high privileged background, a very high socioeconomic background, that kind of not felt entitled, but felt comfortable with the position that they were given. And I didn't feel the same. I felt like I had to every day prove myself that I deserve to be sat in these seats that I am, that I'm good enough to be provided the privilege to go to such a school, to study in such halls, to learn from such teachers, that I still feel to this day that I need to earn that right. And it's really hard sometimes when you don't have other representation in the school, other people that are like you, other people that are, you know, that share your same social identities that you can look up to and say, it's representation, you know, people like me exist here. So at first it was quite hard for me to be comfortable in that scenario, but you just have to remind yourself that I'm the representation that I need, and that's enough for me.
I like how you finished that. The representation you need, and that's enough for you. Not to like create a big tangent, but I was thinking of if perfectionism, right? Like if being a perfectionist would fall under the category of imposter syndrome. Because if I'm self-criticizing my work, if I'm setting unrealistic standards, just wanting to be flawless in the work that I do, and have this constant fear of failure, whether it's imposed from the external or not, because perfectionism, as an experience of perfectionism, it's very hard, right? And would this classify as imposter syndrome? I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I feel like when you are overly perfectionist, or in the sense that you described it at least, it still represents a conflict between the way you perceive yourself and the way other people perceive you. So people obviously, like, in the sense of perfection, everyone defines that differently. Like your idea of perfection might be getting 100% on a test, but my idea of perfection might be getting 80%. So like, how do you define I mean, this is going a bit on a tangent now, but
I see where you're coming from.
yeah.
I feel like you're trying to say that, I guess, even the expectations for perfectionism are set externally. Am I getting it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's phrased better actually.
Yes, Fatih.
I think perfectionism and imposter syndrome coexist most of the time in individuals. I think it's these traits that we have, but also are imposed on us by our environment and society, that has to holds us to like high standard of quality of something, of producing the best, or always having high expectations from us. So I think they coexist in individuals. They definitely do have an intersection, but I do think they're different in the sense that perfectionism doesn't really intersect with the privilege side of imposter syndrome. You can still not have imposter syndrome. You can be totally fine and comfortable with the level, the position that you're at school or in your company or in life, but still want to do things to the T, to the max of how it renders in your head that this is how it should be done and no other way. You know, so they can coexist.
I like what you're saying. Do you mind if I add something that I've just found? I've been just like searching something on the side regarding, I guess, the intersectionality of perfectionism and imposter syndrome. And there are a few points where it like clearly intersects, like parts of society. One goes gender and perfectionism and imposter syndrome. And it kind of defines it as gender norms and expectations can shape how individuals experience perfectionism and imposter syndrome. Right? Women may face societal pressure to be perfect in multiple domains of life, such as appearance, career, and relationships. And then this can contribute to heightened perfectionist tendencies and feelings of being an imposter despite their achievements. And men, on the other hand, may experience pressure to embody traits associated with traditional masculinity, such as being strong, self-reliant, and successful. And whereas this pressure can lead to perfectionistic tendencies and feelings of inadequacy or fragilence. Then it goes to race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and intersectionality and coping mechanisms for this little intersection, which is Interesting. Which I guess brings us back to the expectations for perfectionism subconsciously being set by external implications. Cool.
Now, on the topic of expectations from other people, actually, I wanted to raise a point. It's quite interesting that millennial people are apparently more likely to feel like frauds in the workplace compared to people aged 65 or above. So baby boomers, they are maybe only 3% of them are reported to suffer from feelings of self-doubt, which is quite an interesting difference between generations. And it got me thinking, what about Gen Z? What about our generation? Do we predict anything at all for how we'll experience this in the workplace? Would we feel perhaps more fraudulent, less? Okay, Fatih, I think you raised first. So
I definitely feel like before I comment on how Gen Z will feel, I want to talk a little bit about why millennials feel that way. And I definitely feel like it's because of the system and the structure that we live in. Capitalism has made it quite impossible for millennials to feel like their work is being paid off in a positive light. They find themselves quite working, but not being able to afford rent or a house, or trying to find some, physical validation for all of their work, which in today's society and structure that we're living in is quite impossible. Meanwhile, for baby boomers, that was not the case. Things are more affordable, your work paid off easily. There was not as much as competition in whether in business or in other things. Things were more maybe they were not as much accessible because of the improvements in technology in the recent years, but there was less competition. Things were just easier to achieve back then. But now, because of the system, again, going back to the capitalist system that we live in, I think Gen Z has a quite different approach to millennials. I think we could skew on either end of the spectrum in this. We understand how the system is affecting us. We understand that, yes, I'm of this background, of this privilege, of this identity. I am maybe 50 steps behind another individual, but I know. And I think that's our difference with millennials. I think there was a gap in the knowledge of why we're not succeeding, why I'm being put back, why my efforts are not paying off. And that's not the case for us right now. We know why they're not. We know what's putting us back. And how can we deal with this? How can we actually break the system down and deconstruct it or rearrange it or have another view on the system and how it can then work for us? I think we can skew on either end of the spectrum on this.
I like how you said that Gen Z can skew on either end of the spectrum here. Commenting on, I'm going to go with like the older generations. Sure, let's hit with boomers, Gen X. I think there might be, I guess, less reports or expressions of self-doubt, and that might be because of traditional gender roles, for example, right? Just could be one where they have dictated different standards and expectations on.
I think there's a connection issue.
Like you said, Fatih. Am I being cut off? Okay.
I think you're back.
It's okay. Am I back right now? Where did I? Okay. I was saying how. Sure. So I was saying how changing cultural norms, right, might be the reason for why there's less reports and expressions from like older generations, like boomers and Gen X. First, because I don't know how much research was first of all done into, I guess, psychological things like this back then, right? I'm gonna assume it was way less. And other than that, societal standards, in this instance, like gender roles, it might be, just a given that men or people who are abiding by this social standard of just, resilience and unfazedness just shouldn't be expressing self-doubt and reporting it, right? And coming back to increased awareness in Gen Z, for us, I think, like Fatih said, we're definitely living in a time where expectations are really high. Qualifications for workplaces and academics and institutions are just on the speed increasing, and therefore I think there's much more like criticism from ourselves and from others for everyone's work. But then you can be overly aware and, like Fatih said, and slide on the other end of the spectrum. Yeah, I think it comes definitely. I like how you put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that skewing the whole spectrum is really shaped by social media and how we use it. I feel like there are two sides of social media. Well, in this case anyway, one of it is like promoting healing, self-awareness, more of like a spiritual understanding of the self. But then on the other hand, because of these heightened expectations for qualifications, work experience, and things like this that we need for our applications and to get to where we want to be, we are also seeing like people on social media doing maybe a lot of things at the same time. We're seeing on LinkedIn, for example, we're seeing perfect records almost of someone doing a different activity every month towards their field. And at times that might awaken feelings of inadequacy, because especially if you're not used to particularly using social media in that sense, it could in an inherent sense pressure you to, act a certain way or meet these requirements that just leave no time for yourself. Because can you imagine doing like 4 internships at the same time and having no time to yourself whatsoever? So yeah, I feel like social media is definitely a big player here. Go on, Fatih.
Oof, social media is definitely a dangerous tool, and I see a lot of people using it the wrong way. I see a lot of people giving into social media. I think in today's day and age, where we are valued by not who we are, what we are, but what we can give. So the system wants more from us and less of us, in a sense. Where if we're not doing something productive, if we're not, we're not making something, we're not producing content, we're not studying or working or doing something for the next day, then we feel this, I feel this sense of like impending doom, in a sense, that I'm wasting my time. I'm not doing something that's gonna help me tomorrow or the next day or in a year. So it's really, really hard to stay sustainable when there's so much going on. Social media is definitely very destructive in the sense that I can take my phone and I can scroll hours and hours consuming loads of content that was created by individuals that felt like they had to produce this content because they have to either feel connected or feel valuable because they're producing something. They feel productive instead of just taking a moment to do nothing and be okay with that at the same time. To feel like I don't need to give in to the system. I can be okay without following the the crowd without feeling like I have to be always on my A game. I always have to be on top of everything. I always have to be constantly perfect. It's really, really hard. It really is. And it's quite difficult to stay self-sustainable within ourselves, to say, you know what, I didn't do this one thing. Other people are doing 50 things. It's fine. I'm still going to see tomorrow. You know, we have to remind ourselves that.
But I think that begs the question of like, are other people really doing 50 things? Is like, is it coming across that way? Yeah. Right. There's that. There's again play of privilege here, right? Like who can do what, how much, when, what kind of other needs they need to take care of, besides being productive in the capitalistic sense. And it makes me sad how every time I have conversations like this, I feel more driven to, I guess, escaping this form of life and just liberating myself away from it. And it's not realistic, obviously. It's not easy to pull yourself out of this self-given, and I mean not really self-given. It's just we're born into it. It's the way it is. You either push through it and try to, I guess, diminish it from within or alter it the way you'd like, or just completely making yourself off grid. Like you just inflicted a sense of minor doom in my head with what you said, that I'm like having a minuscule sense of crisis right now. I'm gonna pass it on.
Yeah, that I used to, especially in my second year of university, when I was really going through like feelings of imposter syndrome. One day I was like, what if I just kind of go to like a forest, a jungle, and just eat fruit for the rest of my life? Just, you know, that would be my way of life, and that would be perfectly chill. And what you guys were saying made me think about what I said earlier about the two sides of social media, because I mentioned like the healing and spirituality side initially, but then I started thinking, how is healing promoted? Like if I just went on TikTok right now and searched healing or something, I would probably get my 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. routine. 5 a.m. wake up, you know, go for a run, and then it's like a whole packed day with a lot of like privileged aspects. I'd say. So it does. I am going on a bit of a tangent here, but is healing, spiritual healing for the privileged, like, or do I, you know, I obviously need to have, like, from watching those videos, I feel like, oh, I need to have the entire day to myself, or I need to fill up my day with different activities, and then that gets overwhelming. So yeah, I think Deren, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I want to add on to this like this. Just say toxic positivity first, right? Like it's a thing. It's on social media. Personally, when I see these kind of videos, first it starts off inspiring, right? Like, and I'm following up with like the third thing the person does in the video, then the fourth thing they need to do in their day to feel, I guess, this kind of relief and serenity. And I find myself being like, if my perfectionist self comes into play, and I go, oh, if I can't fulfill the third task, then might as well just not try, right? And it's very off-putting in a way. I like just not for me in a way. And then you asked about is, you know, this kind of healing thing for the privileged, and I think yes, to an extent, but I think the forms of it that are just colonized, like there's a sense of healing through this social media sense that I call whitewashed. It has like this colonized idea, like sense to it, which is definitely for the privileged because it's unrealistic. I'm gonna think about that and get back to you. Meanwhile, Fatih says what he'll say.
Oh my God. I just want to start off with that. If capitalists could sell you air, they would. And what's happening now is they're selling you happiness. I see a lot of, as had mentioned by Deren, toxic positivity, or positivity that can be sold. Come, let's take you to this country where you can have a retreat and feel better about yourself because you're away from the system, and it's a form of escapism, but you're not escaping, actually. You're even more deep rooted in the system. You're actually paying to quote unquote heal, but you're not healing from anything. The system is what's causing your pain, your struggle, your stress, your anxiety, all of these things. And you're taking a moment from your life to escape, to leave that all behind, quote unquote. At the end of the day, what are you going to do again? You're going to come back to that. You're still going to be stuck at your 9 to 5 or your stressful job, or have that sense of it's not working. I'm doing everything, but it's not working feeling, which it's really sad to see people that are stuck in that cycle. It really is. The fact that they're trying to outsource their happiness, they're trying to find it in another place or in another person or in another city or in another anything, and not looking inward and saying, what do I need right now? What can I add to myself? What's making me feel like this? Taking a moment to just understand our feelings, understand our worries, and what we can do about them. Because if we can't help ourselves on our scale, then in my beliefs, no matter how hard you reach out for anything else, if you can't help yourself, you're not going to get help from anyone else. You need to help yourself first. Yep.
Regarding that, can I ask a question about, like, because this is my experience and this might not be shared, but why is it getting harder to sit down with my emotions and feelings and my thoughts and to be okay with it, right? Like, to dwell in them, because I find myself starting to dwell into misery, which starts making it very hard to continue my day afterwards. And just like just finding practices or ways to wash that off after, I guess, dwelling in, and to continue my day. And I wanted to just raise this question: why do we think it's becoming so hard to sit down with our feelings? And I don't think it's a short attention span thing. I think short attention spans have been with us, with our just humanity since our evolution.
Wait, so by dwelling, I just need to clarify, do you mean that you sit down with your thoughts and kind of really get into them to the point that you
That's what I
can't
mean.
get out?
No, dwelling, I mean by dwelling is the ability to be able to sit down with your feelings and emotions. That's it, right? But trying to do that and then finding yourself in a place of misery, that's what I don't like, right? Which is maybe problematic on my side, which is maybe me putting bad connotations on the experience of feeling miserable. Maybe that's also something to be dwelled in, and it's okay. And yeah, that's it.
Well, how I see it is we live a very, very fast-paced life. It's one thing finishes, we're on to the next. So it's kind of hard for us to break away from that norm of maybe we're always heading towards a new goal, a new aspiration. We've set deadlines for ourselves. We need to hit all of these things, and to actually just say, pause. I'm going to take a moment. I just want to exist in the now without anything. It's really, really hard. And it's something that is not going to come to someone overnight. It's not going to be taught to someone. It's a long process that you have to go through with yourself, with another person, sharing these things, opening up about these things to people that you actually can trust that will hear you. I think it's really, really important.
You said existing in the now, and I just started thinking, how often do I do that? Because with our fast-paced life, even when we sit down and we're occupying ourselves with like something more relaxing, like say you're just scrolling through TikTok on your phone, or you're not doing like one of your academic tasks or something job related at least. But am I actually thinking about my feelings? Am I in the now? Or am I actually thinking about my next task in my head while I'm occupying myself physically with the thing in front of me? So yeah, I feel like maybe we need to really focus on those times when we're not doing tasks within our fast-paced life, and then really put effort into the existing in the now side of things.
Like adding on to that, in my experience, sitting down and doom scrolling on TikTok, or just occupying myself with social media in that context, right? Like fast-paced content, just absorption. I'm not really occupying myself. I see it as a sense of momentarily desensitizing myself to whatever anxiety that's following up, right? And I'm not really gaining any progress or helping anxiety. I'm just cutting a chunk out of my day from that experience. And it's like once the experience ends, I can tie the two ends as if nothing happened in between. And it gets me nowhere, but it's become this, like, just, I'm gonna sadly say, put this out there, it's become this addictive doing now. Like I just do it out of instinct, and I have not found the willingness to just avert that. Stop. It's sad.
Would you say it's a form of escapism?
Absolutely. I think it's a form of escapism, but which brings me back to what you said earlier, right? Like these forms of, I guess, let's say like a week-long retreat somewhere else, or pushing yourself somewhere else, or like getting yourself out of the state you're currently in, because it's not self-sustainable in the way that it is. You can't really feed your soul or yourself in ways that would make you motivated to continue doing what you're doing. Hence, I'm finding ways to escape. And whether that is through desensitizing myself, or finding, I guess, things to do that are short-lived, right? Like I know this won't repeat. For example, if I'm moving out to a retreat, I know there's an expiration date on it, and I'm trying to make that as good for me as possible in that week-long thing. It's coming to an end, and they're like, ooh, gotta get back to this full of anxiety sort of living where I'm trying to catch up to deadlines and work and make myself feel not like an imposter and productive. And like you said, because in our daily lives, we have really just how do I put this? Like eradicated things that just feed us, and it's making us hard to continue living in it. And I think these practices can only start being re-implemented into our lives when we sit down with our emotions, ask ourselves what it is that I need, not temporarily, but what it is that you need to start giving your life quality, right? Like emotional quality also. And start finding minor ways, whether that's through other people, whether that's through yourself, or just mini activities, but not temporary ones, and start implementing those into our days. And I'm thinking what I could be doing, and I was thinking is reading a book the same thing as desensitizing myself through TikTok. And it doesn't have to be, right? Like reading a book, sometimes I'm more in there and it's really happening. But then this brings me to my other part. When I'm doing something that is supposed to make me rest, right? Whatever that may be, I still find myself feeling guilty, right? This perfectionist person comes to my head and goes, you could be actually doing all these other things right now where you're productive, catching up with your academics, doing this, doing that, but you're choosing to do what? This, which is right. I think it's about instant gratification. We have become so comfortable with instant reward systems. Maybe you do something, you know it's submitted, voila, your grade, or you see it. Whereas healing is so much prolonged. Healing takes time and effort, and the efforts of it, like you'll see its products so far into its future that sorry, I'm tangenting, but yeah, I'm gonna end it there. And I would like to move on to, I guess, healing practices, or I guess, how do we overcome imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think that point you are making really ties into our final point. How can we overcome it? How can we, seek support ourselves, support from other people? Yeah, Fatih, go ahead.
I think it's really, really difficult. To just give an example of myself, when I speak to my classmates and I hear that people are studying 20 hours a week for one subject, 10 hours a week for the other subject, and I'm like, oh, should I be doing that? Do I need to push myself even more than I am currently? Is it realistic for me? Do I have the time, space, the energy, the capacity to do all of those things? But then we need to understand that it's each according to their own. No two people can do the same amounts. No two people are, those two people can succeed at the same level by doing different things. We each have our own capabilities. We each have our own resources, our own privilege, our own just self energy to be able to put in the work for things. But because we're put on the same scale, we're judged on the same gradings, it's really, really difficult to say I'm doing this and it's good enough. I can do this many hours, I can put in this much effort, and that's fine. And I'm going to get a good grade, let's say, for example, and I deserved it. Even though I didn't put in X amount of effort, even though I put in more effort, I still deserve what I got. And it's to be able to understand that it was not luck. It was not some magical, happening that put you in this position that tomorrow is going to be taken out of your hands and you need to prove yourself every single day, every single hour, every single minute. You got here for a reason. You got here because you worked hard, because you deserve it, because you were meant to be in this position that you are. And it's difficult for individuals with imposter syndrome to accept that. And one way that we can overcome this is by verbalizing it, by speaking up about it to individuals that want to hear us. It could be a friend, family, a stranger, anyone that is going to hear us out, to actually validate our concerns, to say, yes, you did work hard, to remind ourselves that we worked hard, that we deserve to be sat in the seats that we're sat, to make sure that we are okay with our achievements and not giving other people credit, taking the credit for ourselves. It's really hard, but it's just about reminding yourself that.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point in that everyone has unique values that, those are theirs. And, we need to recognize that we're all different individuals. Like, yes, we are placed in the same education system. We are expected to sit our assessments in the same way, but we all differ immensely in what our talents are, in what we're good at in general, and that's completely fine. And just because I might not get the best grade from this exam, that number doesn't define my abilities in life or going forward in the workplace. And I was actually watching a TED Talk by Casey Brown. She's an American entrepreneur earlier, and she was talking about how women specifically can, define their value in order to get the kind of put the price on their work that they deserve. Because what we oftentimes see is that women kind of undersell themselves in a business environment. And she was saying to ask yourself 3 questions. What are my clients' needs and how do I meet them? What do I do that no one else does? And what value do I add into the life of the person that I'm helping? So this process, essentially kind of asking yourself questions and answering them, helps you find your authentic voice in a sense, and you realize your value as an individual and your strengths, which I think recognizing your strengths and weaknesses as a person, this kind of self-awareness is very important in overcoming self-doubt. But yeah, Fatih, go ahead.
I really like the second point that you had raised. Could you repeat it again, please?
I mean, the second question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
What do I do that no one else does?
Yeah.
Was it?
This really puts emphasis on our individuality and not what we provide, but what we can bring as our own self. And a little quote that I like to use to remind myself of this is, don't be the best, be the only, because you're the only one who can be you, and you're doing you the best. No one else is going to be Deren, no one else is going to be Ayşe, no one else is going to be Fatih. It's us that's going to do that, and no one else can do that. And I really like that.
I love that. Can I just say how beautiful that sounds? Don't be the best. Be only. Be you. Be the only one, because you are the only one, and embrace that, right? And of what you two said, I've accumulated some points of how I guess we would objectively overcome imposter syndrome. Do you mind if I go over them? So I think we collectively agree that first we have to recognize imposter syndrome, right? And how that is through, I guess, normalizing our experience. And I thought of it like we start and like involving reflective practices into our lives, reflecting on things, just thinking about things after they're done, to an extent that, you know, like change perspectives about like things that happen in your life, because tunnel vision is a real thing, and I'll get to that. So challenging negative self-talk is one where remind yourself of your accomplishments and skills and qualifications, because it's easy to get lost in all this like negative talk, and we give so much little focus to all these qualifications, not accomplishments I have achieved over the time. For myself, reframing perfectionism, because this is one I struggle with a lot, because embracing the concept of good enough is something I have a hard time. Through like school and life, I found myself, even if I'm working like a group project, I find myself needing for the work that I do to be this unrealistic sense of perfectionism that I can't trust people, which is a problem, right? Like not being able to trust and not being able to be collaborative is a huge downside to, I guess, being social. And I would find myself taking on the whole work if it meant that my name was going to be on it. And it's such a problematic way of thinking that Fatih one day told me this thing that I've been like trying to reiterate in my head when I need it. And it was, so statistically, if you do something 1,000 times at a mediocre quality, whatever that means, cumulatively, that thing is more perfect than you trying to achieve something once at the most perfect level, right? Like you attempting something once, but the most perfect that it can be is less perfect then you're cumulatively doing something mediocre 1,000 times. And this has been like trying to have me reframe this idea of perfectionism. Again, echoing celebrating achievements, right? Maybe I don't know how to do this, but recording our achievements, like, ooh, was I reading a book, like what I read, or like keeping little notes of what I've done, if I've watered my plants, if I've drank enough water today, but just these little things, right? I think it can really help. And other is talking to supportive individuals, like discussing your experience with others who can relate, can alleviate the feelings of isolation, which is what I'm doing right now by speaking to you, the both of you. If you can, I guess seeking professional help would be very helpful. If you have like guidance about tools and strategies tailored to your specific needs, right? Because not everything can be just solved through, I guess, improfessional like support. And there are cases where everyone will need professional help. Cultivating self-compassion is another point. So treating yourself with the same kind of kindness and empathy you would extend to a friend. This is something I don't do enough, right? I approach people with so much empathy, or not even people, but just objects even around me. The kind of empathy I don't give to myself. Like inanimate things around me have so much more, I guess, just elegancy than I do, which is a problem in my head. And embracing growth mindset, when focusing solely on external validation, I think this is about teaching ourselves how to seek validation internally, developing a sense of self-worth that is independent of achievements or external recognition. I think this can again be done through self-reflecting, embracing self-acceptance, practicing mindfulness. Just brings us back to just sitting down with yourself and listening to your, whether you call it the sixth sense, your intuition, your thoughts and your emotions. And I think this just is overall a good way to just embark on overcoming this unrealistic sense of perfectionism and imposter syndrome. Yeah, I should.
Yeah, I feel like I could definitely relate to you at one point with the empathy point you made. Sometimes we really forget that we need to be nice to ourselves the way that we're nice to the world. I had "be kind to yourself" written on a piece of paper on my wall during exam season because I needed to remind myself that like it's okay if you skipped a couple of hours of studying today. You are a human being. Be kind to yourself. Like it's fine. Sometimes we might be very angry at ourselves and say, oh, like I didn't do this, I'm dumb, I'm incapable. Be kind to yourself. That's in the interest of time, probably that will be the ending point, unless any of you want to jump in and say anything at all.
Maybe a closing statement.
Oh yeah, of course, go first.
I definitely think that empathy, to empathize with others, is easier than to empathize with ourselves. But empathy is a muscle that we need to train. It's just giving yourself that little time of day, or doing something good for yourself, starting off small and then building it up over time. That's the only way we can actually learn how to reflect all of that good things that we do for other people to ourselves. So it takes time, but take it slowly.
And I'm gonna say, take care of yourself holistically, meaning nourish your physical, emotional, and mental self, right? So like keep an eye out for all these elements. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
On a final note, just reiterating that doubts and fears about yourself are completely normal, but as individuals, they do not define our value or our uniqueness. So, and we will end it on that point, but I want to thank you both so much for being on this podcast episode with me and sharing your amazing ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, you two are lovely.
And yeah, I will see you on the next episode. So bye.
Ciao.
Bye.